everybody, and welcome back to the Seeking Play podcast. I would just like to remind our listeners at home that you can also watch our videos on YouTube and Spotify, as a number of our guests throughout the season built out their answers using Lego. In today's episode, we were joined by the wonderful Dr. Lisha O'Sullivan and Professor Emer Ring from Mary Immaculate College in Limerick. Professor Emer Ring is the Dean of Education at Mary Immaculate College. Emer worked as a senior inspector with the Department of Education and Skills. She was a primary mainstream class teacher and a learning support resource teacher prior to joining Mary Immaculate College. Emer lectures across early childhood and teaches education programs and supervises research from undergraduate to doctorate levels. Emer has been the principal investigator on a range of national research projects covering areas such as early childhood, primary and post-primary education, inclusion, student voice, pedagogy, and autism. She has also published extensively in the area of education. Dr. Lisha O'Sullivan is the head of the Department of Reflective Pedagogy and Early Childhood Studies at Mary Immaculate College. Lisha lectures across early childhood and teacher education programs at Mary Immaculate College, and she also supervises research in early childhood education at undergraduate, master's, and PhD level. Prior to joining the Faculty of Education, Lisha worked in the areas of special education, community childcare, family support, and play therapy.
So, having watched the episode again, we picked out four quotes that we really enjoyed ourselves. So, for Professor Emer Ring, learning has to be fun in order for us to be motivated and interested. Again, for Professor Emer Ring, playfulness as a leader is about give and take, curiosity, and seeing the superpower in everybody. And for Dr. Lisha O'Sullivan, as adults, it's our responsibility to see the gaps in children's play diets to ensure they have experiences to thrive. And Lisa's final quote is, "If play is meaning-making, it's important that children have control over the process." We'd also like to promote an upcoming event that's happening in Mary Immaculate College on the 2nd of March, 2024. It's the Revolutionising Education Through play. And Lisha and Emer and all of their colleagues have been incredibly busy putting this together. It hasn't happened since 2019 because of COVID. So it really is wonderful to see it happening again. And we ourselves will be facilitating a workshop, and we'd love to see you there. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Seeking Play podcast. We are delighted to be joined by Professor Emer Ring and Dr. Lisha O'Sullivan this afternoon. Thank you so much, Lisha and Emer, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us this afternoon. We really appreciate it. So I am going to kick things off, and I'm going to ask you both, could you share with our listeners, what were you like as a kid?
Well, as much as I can remember at this point, Jane, I will certainly be delighted to share. And also, we have another guest on the podcast. That's Charlie, the dog, who may come in from time to time, just so everyone knows.
You're welcome, Charlie.
So I suppose, I definitely remember being very wedded to play from a very early stage, as far back as I can actually remember. And in particular, imaginative play. I think that was my forte. I lived in the town of Cahersiveen, and we had a shop. And up the back of the shop, there was a place that I developed really as Fairyland, it was called. So we decorated all of the trees and tinsel from Christmas, and every evening after school with all of my friends, we would go to Fairyland. So that is an abiding memory for me. But also, my grandfather used to call me Fighting Paul. And I have often thought about that, actually, because I don't see myself as a contrarian. Maybe others do, but I don't. But I think it was related to the fact that if I saw that something needed to be said, I was going to say it. So I wasn't going to be silent. And I think that has something that has I have carried with me really right up until now. And some people would say too much so. But in terms of, you know what, that ad, that Dunn Stores ad, actually, the Christmas Dunn Stores ad always reminds me of myself when the child says, oh, we're going to put up all the lights so everyone will see where we are and Santi will be able to come. And the little girl says, but what about everybody else? So that's kind of a snapshot of my memory of the kind of defining features that I remember from childhood.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And how about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I think similar to Emer, definitely kind of imaginative pretend play is something that I really remember. I'm showing my age now, but I suppose Cindy was a big thing. I don't know, does Cindy exist anymore? And then Barbie came along. So I suppose just the, play with those, and particularly, I suppose, social play, that kind of joy of having friends or family that had different bits and bobs and coming together and swapping clothes and all the rest of it. I suppose, unlike Emer, I grew up in a more rural environment. So when I look back kind of lightly, I think, no, I didn't really do much construction play. But then when I delve a bit deeper, I think I did, but it was more outside and open-ended materials. There was a stream quite near where I lived, and I remember spending a lot of time there, just using rocks and stones, building dams, that kind of thing. And when I look back now, I think I might have had an imaginary companion as well. The Care Bears were very big back there at the start of the 80s, and I had a Funshine bear, the yellow one. And I think I certainly treated that bear like it was human rather than a bear. And I suppose, that imaginative side probably stayed with me kind of into middle childhood, and looking back, just that influence of popular culture. I remember ABBA was big at the time, and the putting on the slouchy ankle boots and tying ties around your head and singing into the hairbrush and all those kind of things. So they're the kind of things that cropped into my head, as Emer says, from what I can remember.
So there's no putting ties on your head and rocking out to ABBA now?
Of course there is. Yes, that's the next question, is it?
And I must say the slouchy ankle boots the sock boots have made a comeback, definitely. I see them in the stores right now.
So, like, again, just even listening to academics or people who have a more nuanced understanding of play, the way you just identified the different types of play, it's always such a joy to hear that, because generally it's just play. Oh, when I played as a kid. But so it was lovely for you to actually localize that and give each modality its appropriate name. For both of you, can you think back, like, still during your childhood, during those formative years, was there any bumps or scrapes or bruises or even breaks or mishaps or adventures that you had as a kid that you think forms a part of your identity now as an adult?
Yeah, I suppose, Ronan, just thinking about that, if we take childhood up as far as 18, well, it's actually up as far as 102 with Iris Abfel, who I'll be talking about later. Hopefully I get a chance to talk about her. She's one of my heroes. But for me, I always wanted to be a teacher. That's really what I always wanted to be from the earliest time I can remember. I think Little House on the Prairie, in fact, had a really big influence on me. So my brother Dermot, who he was 5 years younger than me, I would always ask him to play school with me. And of course, I was the teacher and he was the pupil. And we still have photographs of me teaching Dermot. But unfortunately, when Dermot was I was in my early teens, he developed mental health issues. And that for me was a huge, when you say that word break or a scar at that time, because really, there was so little known about mental health issues at that time. And I think, when we look at play now and what we know about play, and Professor Paul Ramchandani in Cambridge talks about the impact of play on our mental health and on our well-being, I often think of the possibilities that there may have been there in play that maybe were not tapped into in relation to Dermot. So I kind of associate him a lot with my thinking around play, because he was a victim really of my playfulness in terms of that role play and in terms of wanting to be a teacher, and really how powerful play was for me on that journey, because it enabled me from, you know, as far back as I can remember, to actually be that person, to dream that dream, to have that dream, to bring.
Yeah, I think for me, I was more kind of about it in the kind of real physical bumps and bruises. And I suppose growing up in the country, and I suppose in a time really, I think where we had more freedom. When I was thinking about this, I just remember having those extended periods, which are so important and which can be hard to find now, and just literally being able to go off. I mean, one of my earliest bumps and bruises was obviously I must have been very young, about 1 or younger, in a walker, and I managed to find a can of paint and poured it all over my head. So that was probably fun at the time until the paint fell out, and then there was a couple of hours of not so much fun. I suppose that kind of risk taking, probably I remember things like learning to roller skate, learning to cycle. Again, I lived up in the hill, which probably wasn't the most conducive to learning those things. So just remember a lot of falling, getting back up again, falling, getting back up again. So I suppose just maybe looking back, the importance of that for self-regulation, for just kind of keeping on going and trying again, and just having the freedom to do that.
Yeah, it's I think it was a presentation by Tim McGill. I hope I got his name right, Tim McGill. In get his name right, it's just the presentation was in relation to the shrinking the kilometer radius of play since great grandparents to current day. It's just so frightening. It's just so frightening. Even Lisha, for you to go down a hill. Some kids now, even though they might live on a hill, they don't get to go down the hill. It's frightening. I'll try and link it to the show notes, and apologies. I know his name is Tim. I hopefully got that part right. In that it's quite scary in terms of kilometer radius shrinking down to a kilometer or two as a play zone.
So I shared some quotes with you both about play, and you both identified 1 or 2 quotes that resonated with you. So Emer, if you would like to share the 2 quotes that you picked, and just really to talk to us about, you know, why these quotes resonated with you.
Okay, Jane, thank you. And thank you for all the great quotes. It was really hard to make a selection, but I chose one by Savannah Weiss and the other by Dee Gamage. So the first one, play embeds hopefulness and joy, which is really important when working towards a more socially and ecologically just society. So I'll just speak to that one first. I think for when we're talking about play in education, sometimes I think we can forget that learning has to be fun. In order for us to be motivated, in order for us to be interested, that element of fun needs to be there. And play embeds that, and it brings the joy of learning to the fore. We kind of almost learn unknowns to ourselves. And when we talk about a socially just society, we see what's going on all over the place at the moment in terms of the global unrest, and we see what's going on ecologically in terms of the whole sustainability agenda, and really how play can support those key components of living in a world where we are all happy to be and where everyone can thrive. I think is so important. In terms of socially just, we are really struggling to create an inclusive education system for all of our children. So play presents a hugely powerful tool to ensure that everyone is included, because we all know that we're all wired really to play from the start. And children, you know, often there's research that shows that some children who learn differently don't automatically play. But that's our job as educators, to provide them with those opportunities. And I think what's really important here is neuroscience. Neuroscience is presenting us with a lot of opportunities to understand better those neural pathways that can be really strengthened to play, and that will have a lasting impact on children and on their lives right into the future. So hope, I think we have to have hope, because without hope, well, the world is going to be a very, very sad place to live. So that idea of play embedding hopefulness and joy, for me, really speaks to the power of play and its importance in all of our lives, not just in education, but in all of our lives. The second one I chose from Dee Gamage was adult playfulness is about being present, to not jump to conclusions, to be curious so you can shift your perspective. So this is really from my personal life. I'm the, not personal work, which is almost personal at this stage. That was a Freudian slip, I think. But, you know, as Dean of the Faculty of Education at Mary Immaculate College, of course, I have a leadership role. And leadership can be a very challenging role. But I think what I really find very valuable is to promote that voice, and that voice through playfulness, that we're all not afraid to play with ideas, because unless we have an open mind, unless we're curious, and that word present is very important, because having come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of us have been on Zoom a lot of the time. And actually, when we're on Zoom, well, I'll confess to not always being present, because I'm there and I'm trying to answer emails and I'm trying to do my to-do list for the week. And not being present actually can be very exhausting, because what you're doing is you're being present in a whole lot of different spaces all at once. But in order to create organizations, and I'm talking about this from an organizational perspective, in any organization, we have to be present and we have to be open-minded in terms of everyone not being afraid to express their views, because really it's in that space of shared cognition that great things happen. So that's why I loved Dee Gamage's quote.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Yeah, well, I will. So, Lisa, you identified Susan Rock was your first quote. And it was, "We have not built classrooms that offer enough space for students to move while they were learning and thinking." So why did you pick this quote?
Yeah, I think actually the two I picked, even though they were also interesting, were very much, I suppose, about the environment and the importance of the environment. And I suppose just that sense of how can we support every child to reach their potential. And, you know, again, we believe that all children are, you know, intrinsically motivated to engage in play and to learn through play. But I think, you know, we can maybe foster that or inhibit it depending on the kind of environment that we have. And I suppose sometimes when even I look back to the kind of classrooms that I learned in, they were not very conducive to playful learning. So I suppose, you know, just that idea of how can we, as Emer said, be hopeful and look to the future and look to ways to design classroom learning environments where, yes, we can work towards curriculum learning goals, but in a way, I suppose, that honours how children learn their interests and harnesses their motivation. So yeah, just I suppose that idea of spaces where children are, you know, minds on and hands on. Emer mentioned the pandemic there. I think, you know, one thing it has reinforced is the importance of that outdoor learning environment as well. And I think we have some work to do in terms of how we utilise that to its potential. So yeah, I could keep talking about it, but thanks, Jane.
Susan, we actually interviewed Susan. She was one of our previous guests, and she is the author of a wonderful book called Minding Bodies. So we will link it in the show notes. And she's doing some fantastic research in this space, in the education space in the US. So she had some great tips and ideas in the education space in a post-COVID world. So we will link that in the show notes. So moving back to the second quote. So you picked a quote from Dr. Mark Maldorf, and it says, "Human beings are naturally curious and playful if we're in an environment where their behaviors are supported." So why did you pick this quote?
Yeah, I think the two, I think actually I came across that one first, and then I came across the one about the classrooms. And I was like, yeah, there's a little link between these two things here. So I suppose it is, again, that we all have that innate curiosity, playfulness, and we talk a lot about, you know, what is play, what are the characteristics of play. But I suppose, again, I've just become very interested in, well, what kind of an environment really supports play. So, you know, I suppose primarily it's even, you know, just about the importance of that emotionally warm, secure environment that, you know, children, adults, that we can, I suppose, feel comfortable pushing ourselves and taking risks. Because I think we know from the research that when children don't feel safe, when their very basic needs are not met, it's very hard to explore, to experiment, to play. So I think that that's probably why that resonated with me, was just that, I suppose, encouraging me to think a bit more about those sorts of conditions. Again, things like maybe the level of challenge, looking at the kind of environments we create in terms of, again, not, I suppose, ensuring that they're not boring or repetitive for children, but also that they're not too overwhelming or overstimulating, and trying to find that balance, creating, I suppose, places, environments where playfulness is nurtured through giving opportunities to engage in solitary play, because sometimes that can be very important for deep learning, but also, of course, opportunities for children or people to come together. And I suppose the research on play across different cultures tells us that, in different cultures, play group sizes can be very different. And even thinking about that, thinking about diversity and how our environments kind of meet the needs of all learners. So there were just a couple of things that cropped into my mind when I just saw that quote. I thought it was quite powerful in terms of just, we all do have that innate playfulness, but maybe our environment can, push that on, or it can limit it.
Mm-hmm. And just to talk about the work you've been doing, both of you, which is, again, we're going to link all of your work in our show notes. It's a wonderful body of research you have. So what are the benefits of play for young children in the early years? And can you talk to us about playfulness and the creation of play spaces for children? So I think leading on, Lisa, to that point.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there are so many benefits, and again, I think the evidence base, is continuing to grow and provide support for play as a prime context for early learning. I suppose, again, going back to that warmth and security, I think, we need to be careful that, I suppose, primarily, I think that the main benefit is for well-being. And I think, again, the pandemic really reinforced that for us, that, ultimately, and I think a lot of the great theorists like Piaget and Vygotsky would have, pointed that out for us. It's that play allows children to make meaning of their life, of their experiences, of people, of things, of places, of events. So just that power to bring all of that into your play, to give you control over it, and I guess to deepen your understanding of yourself and of your family, of your community, of your environment is, I think that's so important. And we need to be careful then that, if play is a kind of a meaning-making enterprise, then obviously it's important that children have control over that process. So that raises a challenge for us as adults that I'm sure we'll return to later on in our conversation. And again, I suppose, imagination and creativity, and we can see that they're the basis of so many adult endeavors, that it's so important in that sense. I suppose, again, for social competence, really play is it's the key context, I suppose, where children come together and learn to be together and learn to negotiate. And then obviously we have a body of research there pointing to the importance for, cognitive development as well. And I could even see that myself when I was working with the Lego, just kind of visualizing things and, learning by trial and error. So certainly so many benefits, but I think primarily really important for emotional well-being.
Anything from Emer along those lines?
Yeah, I suppose, I just maybe focus on that playfulness and the creation of play spaces for children. So Lisa and I in our work are very influenced by the philosophy in Reggio Emilia in the north of Italy by the philosopher called Loris Malaguzzi. So it was provision for young children that was set up after World War II, because at that time the people felt that the devastation of war had impacted, World War II had impacted so much on young children that they needed to create, as Lisa said there, a warm, safe space for children to be. And when you see what's going on at the moment in Gaza and so on, you have to really worry about what we're learning from all of this. So anyway, Loris Malaguzzi was the educator and philosopher and a teacher, actually, who set up that provision in the north of Italy. And he had this philosophy, which he operationalize, because some people can have philosophy, it can stay on the books on the shelf, but he created and he actually operationalized it. And it is that the environment is the third teacher. Basically, the environment is the third teacher. So if we're setting up play spaces, we have to think about what is our aim for children? What do we want them to learn? How do we want them to develop? And education systems around the world have moved towards formative education. And by that I mean education that focuses not just on the cognitive development, because for many years, many education systems focused solely and saw it as education equals cognitive development. But here in Ireland, actually, we can be very proud of ourselves, because from our 1971 curriculum, back that far, we are focused on what we call the holistic development of the child. And by that, we mean the social development, the physical development, the emotional development, the spiritual development, the moral development, and the aesthetic development of the child. So when we're thinking about play spaces, are we creating spaces in our schools, in our early learning and care centres? And when I say schools, I mean primary schools, post-primary schools. Can we actually create spaces where children can flourish, where the formative development of children can be enabled in the environment in which they're living, and or not which they're living, which they're learning, and indeed which they're living in also. And I suppose, Lisa, you talked earlier on about environments and about schools and those traditional schools that we're all familiar with, the rows of desks in a row. And, you know, there's still traces of that, because history, it takes a while for it to wash out in tradition. So thinking about our spaces in classrooms, and I think we've moved on actually, and I do think there's a lot of conversations happening, certainly here in Ireland, because the National Council for Special Education actually have a pilot project in place that Lisa and I were involved in the first phase of it, where now some schools are having days where there are no desks, so children can choose where they want to learn and how they want to learn. So that all really goes back to that concept of the environment is the third teacher, and how we can see that in our classrooms and in our schools.
I think even just the small changes, it doesn't have to be monumental changes as well. And I think, you know, COVID showed the education system how flexible we can be, literally overnight, you know, bringing everything online. So I do think that there definitely, you know, we're moving in the right direction, and there are, you know, changes being made, which is fantastic to see.
And for me, every time we talk, I'm always trying to form a bridge between organizational design or innovation and creativity in organizations. And like I think there's traces of it already, and there always has been, that organization, literally the design of the built environment in an organization probably looks back into the education system. And if it was looking at it previously, then it makes sense why people would have sat in particular, you know, cubicles, and then now we're going to open spaces. But I think then another transition, as the education becomes a little bit more open in terms of open play and no desks, that for us is kind of gratifying to think that I think that transition will be brought into the work environment, and to reimagine what the work environment would look like. Because we know, and there's enough research to point that open plan offices aren't really conducive to collaboration. They can impede it, if anything. And I think there's a new format of design that is going to come through.
I think, is there anything else that either of you want to add about integrating a play-based pedagogy in the classroom?
You know, Jane, just as Ronan was talking there, I think that idea of the environment, but I also think about choice, giving children or adults choice. And that's about agency, really. And it's about having agency in your own learning. And we have to, sometimes I think in Ireland, we don't shout loud enough about what we do, but we have a new curriculum framework for primary and for special schools, which was just launched this March. And also this is all being threaded through post-primary education as well. And at the heart of it all is agency, the child's agency in terms of choice, giving the child choice as to how the child best learns, but also teacher agency. So I just want to put that agentic child out there, and that agentic teacher, and that agentic organization as well, because it's all a long continuum. So that's
absolutely. Look, we've been again reading as best we could literature in regards to play, and agency has always come out. It's even from other interviews, the word agency comes out to the point where we think we might have coined a phrase, or you can tell us it's been around a long time, but plagency. Like play and agency, it's just one and the same. So we're now going to say like, it's just plagency. It's just, there's agency wrapped in play. Has it been out there? Has it been trademarked, or is it just ridiculous?
Sounds good though.
Look it up.
Great one.
Plagency. Okay, plagency. We've got plenty more silly acronyms. We won't share them. That's one of our own. So can you talk to us about adult playfulness and creativity within the workplace? Again, this is a lovely thread of conversation that we have. So can you talk to us about adult playfulness and creativity within the workplace and in your personal lives?
Yeah, it's a real interesting one. And I think it goes probably back to how we conceptualize play. And I suppose historically there's been a tendency to kind of see it as a behavior or an activity, whereas I think we're moving now towards more seeing it, as a disposition and talking more about playful and playfulness. And I suppose that idea that play is not all or nothing, that I suppose a lot of what we do can, play can merge with other motives. So I suppose it's that kind of looking then at and Emer and I are currently writing a book on play. And I suppose one of the challenges was to look at those kind of traditional types of play, like pretend play, construction play, games with rules, physical play, and to ask, well, this doesn't stop once you kind of leave childhood. So what does it kind of look like for us as adults? So we've kind of been trying to kind of map that. And I suppose it's very interesting when you look at constructing and making, and then you can kind of really see the kind of hobbies and pastimes that people have that are an outgrowth, I suppose, of that. So obviously a lot of adults still really enjoy playing with Lego. I suppose the virtual space now allows, for a lot of different types of play to occur. People like, engaging in arts and crafts. It could be cooking and baking or whatever. And then, when you look at pretend play and seeing how, I suppose that might, develop into a love of theatre or cinema, or it could be, even virtual worlds that are not too unlike play worlds. It could be like Lord of the Rings or something like that really suck people in and allow them to, I suppose, use their imagination, similar to how they might in pretend play. And I suppose games with rules, again, is, quite an easy one to see how that transitions into adulthood. So I suppose when we look at it as well, it is just about, if you're looking at that attitude, that, maybe the same thing can be play for one person and not for another. So if you take running, that might be very serious for the competitive runner, but for someone that goes for a jog, it's quite a playful. For me, I like cooking and baking. So, there's a difference between maybe being under pressure, to make a dessert for dinner, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to try that out, see what happens. So sometimes when I think about it straight off, I find it hard to see those links, but then when you delve a bit deeper, I think, we can see that a lot of the things we do in our free time are outgrowths maybe of the kind of play we were interested in as children. I suppose in the workplace, those things, again, like we've mentioned before, like that whole social quality of play, that I suppose opportunities to collaborate in the workplace kind of do, I think, have a link with that. I suppose it obliges us to articulate what we're thinking and feeling. Hopefully collaborating with colleagues reduces the kind of individual cognitive load, and that's a real positive thing. And I guess, again, that imaginative and creative element. And I suppose Robert Root Bernstein and Michelle Root Bernstein have some interesting work in this area, where they've looked at, I suppose, how adults that have been very kind of creative and successful in social sciences and in science would actually recall, yes, I spend a lot of time engaged in that kind of imaginary play when I was little. So I suppose that idea that in order to create or invent something, you need to first of all imagine it. So just that, I suppose, bringing that into our work. And I suppose to go back to Reggio Emilia that Emer mentioned earlier, that I suppose capacity to represent what we think and what we know in a variety of ways. I know for me personally, if I'm trying to solve a problem, you know, I'm kind of using different color pens and sketching and post-its to try and, I suppose, put it out there in a physical form. And I suppose we've been doing that with the Lego builds ourselves today as well. So Emer, I'll head over to you. You might want to add to that.
Yeah, I think you've kind of captured it all, Lisa, there. But I think I looking at adult playfulness, for me, I'm looking at it from an organisation perspective in terms of our workplace. And I heard a great quotation last week from Anna May Rooney, who is involved in the Centre for School Leadership. And she said that leadership was not a position, it was a disposition. And it goes to what you just said there, Lisa, in terms of that disposition and how we build a disposition. And in any organization, I have a strong belief that leadership is about everybody being a leader, not, you know, this traditional hierarchy that we had, but that we're all leaders, and that really has to be cultivated within organizations so that we can build an empathetic organization where everybody has respect for each other. You know, it sounds very simple, but we all know it's not in the least bit simple. But where play contributes to that, I think, is that kind of a disposition where there's give, there's take, there's an openness, there's a curiosity, there's a sense of that everyone has, in a sense, superpowers, and we all respect each other's superpowers in that way. One of my inspirations is Iris Apfel. You may know her. She is a fashion designer, interior designer, and an actress, and she's 102 years of age. So what she says is, I think I shall keep my sense of wonder, which I call childlike, not childish, childlike. I still have a vivid imagination, and I like to try a lot of new things. I just never want to completely grow up. And, you know, I think that's that traditional sense of when we grow up, we're cut off from everything to do with play. But actually, that's the myth we want to explode. And that's the kind of work that Lisa and I do, that play has to be central to all of our lives always, because it will give us that hope. And most of all, it's going to give us that joy. And it's power in the workplace in terms of outcomes, if we're talking about outcomes, because we live in a world where we all have KPIs and all of the rest of it, and how play can actually contribute to achieving those outcomes. So I suppose for me, really, adult playfulness and creativity is critical to a successful organization, to ensuring that an organization is effective and it does what it says on the tin, and everyone enjoys being there.
I think that natural play instinct comes through, and it's always a pleasant surprise for any potential cynic, which naturally would be cynical. I mean, of course, it's not the norm to bring Lego into a boardroom or into an offsite. And we understand that, and we have to spend a lot of time like designing an environment, like you said, a space and a time. We think ultimately, like much of innovation or play is about just designing time. It's an experience. Time is experiential, and play brings that experience to time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are we at the Lego
Yeah,
builds?
we are at the Lego
We're at the
builds.
Lego. This is wonderful. Okay. So build number one, again, for any listener who is unfamiliar with our Lego piece, unfortunately, if you're listening, this is very much video based. So you can go to Spotify and watch the video, or you can go to our website and we have the videos up as well. But we post Lego, but Lisa and Emer are so close, I delivered it. I drove to you. It's the first time I could deliver Lego. I was a Lego delivery man for a few hours. So build number one. What inspires you about your work? What keeps you curious and motivated? So, Emer, you can show yours.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Sorry about this. Now I have a bit of a cough. No, I think it's okay. So, first of all, thank you so much for delivering that Lego. It was like Santa Claus. It was just really, Christmas came early for us this year. So, I think, again, the power of that visual representation, and as well as the environment being the third teacher in Reggio Emilia, there's also a wonderful poem called the 100 languages of children. And basically it is that we all have 100 languages and that we all express ourselves in different ways and that we need to be given the space to do that. So this is what a powerful language we have here in terms of Lego. So I better answer the question, which was about what inspires you about your work. Well, I suppose what inspires me about my work is that education really has the power to transform children's lives. It has the power to transform families' lives, and ultimately it has the power to transform the world. So my Lego build really is about transforming the world into a place where we all can live together in harmony, and in terms of having an environment that's sustainable. There's trees there, if you can see them,
Yeah, you can.
where there's shelter, that everyone has shelter,
Yeah.
that all differences are accommodated and celebrated, and that everyone has a place in that world, really. So for me, we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we have the UN, that was 1989, and Ireland has ratified that. We also have the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which Ireland ratified in 2018. And those two conventions are really important because they are a human rights framework and they enable all of us. There's a right to play in both of them, but of course, there's also a right to childhood. And the job that I do is such a privilege because we can inspire our teachers, our student teachers, and our postgraduate students to all really consider the potential that there is if every child actually has access to education. So there is my Lego build, this ideal world, this utopia that education can create utopia.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's a tough act to follow, Lisa, but I'm looking forward.
Yeah, and I think I might sound like I'm copying Emer as well. But maybe that just means that we're attuned.
Yes.
We promise we did not collaborate on this at all.
Okay, so this is my one. I suppose it was interesting to do in terms of that idea of play as a process, because I actually found that as I had an idea starting, and then as I kind of went on, I think my focus changed a little bit. So I suppose for me, what inspires me, I suppose first thing was play is kind of my main kind of area of work and interest. So I suppose ultimately children inspire me. And again, Emer mentioned just diversity. So I just try to have different figures to just, I suppose, represent all the children, so far that, have influenced my life. And I suppose, I wouldn't keep doing this work if I didn't believe in it. And to believe in it, you have to see it. So, I suppose a big shout out to all the children that have been involved in our research over the years and that I've worked with in that sense. So I think then I found the little pack of elves. So it was like well, so I'm like, yeah, magic, that kind of appeals to me anyway. Maybe as you said, Emer, earlier about being childlike, not childish. So I still like that kind of magical thing. And I suppose there is, I think I feel privileged to kind of, I suppose, study work in this space because it is very magical. And, being on the floor with children when they're trying to figure out what to do when they forget to put a door in their garage, that's magic, just seeing all those different ideas that they come up with. So I have my little elf and a few little bits there that are kind of magical. Then I saw the cat and I'm like, yeah, that brings me back maybe even to my own kind of play memories as being, animals being very important as well. And, that kind of stretching me to be kind of open-minded. Even we think about who you play with, what you play with, that our ideas are broadening all the time. And I think just like Emer, we must have all had the same idea with the trees. I think that to me just kind of, I suppose, was a metaphor for, I suppose what inspires me is that, if we keep working together, like-minded people, that we will, I suppose, create a better world for everyone. And the players today will be the leaders of tomorrow. So that's that one.
They will be the leaders of tomorrow. Okay, wonderful. I was thinking about it. I'm looking forward to grabbing all these
Yes.
wonderful phrases and embedding them into the things you pointed out, digamage, and yeah, we'll do the same for you. So that one's definitely a capture.
So build number 2 was, how do you think your work helps people feel and think differently about the world?
Okay, so I guess I'll start here again. And I suppose my work is very much focused on inclusion, ensuring that we have an inclusive education system, ensuring that all the systems are in place, that we can confidently say that every single child is getting equal opportunity to flourish in our education system. So this is for that lens, the lens through which we view the world, and that certainly is important to me, that lens is very much focused on viewing difference as something that's very positive and something that can greatly enhance our society. So it's that we are all different and that every single person is different and unique, and also the responsibility for us as educators to ensure that we accommodate this difference. So that's in terms of our initial teacher educators, but also through that lens, the importance of policymakers. So this broad arch here is the wide arch of government, of the legislature, of the judiciary, in ensuring that there's a cohesive approach to inclusion and that we're all, in a sense, working in harmony with each other. And in terms of play, how play actually can support us in looking to that lens, because while we look through the lens and we conceptualize, yes, we want this inclusive utopian world, how do we achieve that? And I think play is a great leveler in many ways, because through play, by inculcating in our students the importance of play and the power of play and the possibilities of play and the benefits of play and the fun and the joy of play, we can also bring that right, let that go right up to the to our policymakers as well. I just finished a paper yesterday, actually, and it sounds like it's very divorced from play, but it struck me that actually it's not. So it was a legal review paper of the Education for Persons with Special Educational Needs Act that was commissioned by the Department of Education. And it was a project over a number of months. But as I was actually coming to the end of it, I decided I needed to represent the pieces of legislation in a way that was accessible, because nobody wants to take up a piece of legislation and start reading it from cover to cover. It's just not something I've ever met anybody who says, I can't wait to do that. So what I did was, anyway, I got all of the pieces of legislation, and a little bit like the Lego here, I would have done it with Lego other than I had to present it in a paper. And I made all of these graphics, if you like, and colors, so that the legislation to try to bring it alive. So I think there's room for play and for representation of our ideas in that playful way, in that play, having that disposition. And actually, I hope that the impact of the paper is that it will be accessible to more, so that it will have more influence on those who read it. So I guess that's me, if that makes any sense. Thank you.
I love the way just the usage of the Lego bricks themselves, not just people, the little object, but like that arch can represent so much to you in terms of in terms of policy. And I find it wonderful. I love the way people start to use like little pieces that are ordinarily, you would think it's focused on people, and ordinarily, and then once you can build something like that and represent it as policymakers, I just love that. And look, I would say as well, that kind of like focus, you want to really have people's attention, because again, we're now attention, there's an attention deficit, I would say, irrespective of, even parents with kids have an attention deficit. They're on phones. And I think that's what our work does. And I think that's what creating an object, something that's beyond just text and words, it literally just allows someone, it creates an interest so someone can focus their attention for a little bit longer. And we see that in our workshops, in that people who ordinarily don't talk to one another or probably think they know the person, they just represent themselves in a different way, even though the words could have been said this multiple times. It's how you, like you said, playfully represent the everyday in a playful manner. So I love it. I love it.
Lisa, do you want to share your build?
Yeah, this is the one that I unceremoniously left for. I'll try. There is sense to it somewhere. So I suppose just in terms of kind of impact, I suppose I was just looking back to maybe, when I graduated from my undergraduate degree and went working, and I suppose what really motivated me to go on and train as a play therapist was just that challenge of, communicating with children, of understanding children, and I suppose really seeing play as just so important for that. But when I look back at the time, I think I just used grey bricks. I think it was a kind of a grey space, really. I don't think there was much of an appreciation of the power of play for well-being or for learning. And I suppose when I look back now, I can see how far we've come. We still have a long way to go, but I kind of had this in the middle, was supposed to be a kind of a glass half full, that things, I suppose, change and progress takes time, and I suppose sometimes we can kind of get a little bit frustrated, and maybe the pace of change isn't what we might like it to be. And I thought this was a kind of a representation of myself ploughing forward here, and maybe getting a little bit stuck on that Lego plate from time to time as well, but going forward nonetheless. And this was much nicer originally. I suppose again it was a kind of a more playful world that I suppose embraces everyone, supports all children to reach their potential. And even though my work is primarily in the early years and early primary context, I suppose that importance of play throughout the whole education continuum, in primary and post-primary, and in your guys' work and working with adults, and as well, I suppose, outside of education, that looking forward, there's so far we need to go in terms of, I suppose, spaces for children to play in their communities. And as you said, Ronan, children don't maybe have chances anymore to go down a hill or do things like that. And I think it's as well thinking about our responsibility to look at the kind of gaps in children's play diet, really, and to see how, in homes, in schools, and communities, we can, I suppose, ensure that children have, the kind of experiences that they need to thrive. So that was that one.
Play diet.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. That's a play diet. Again, it kind of brings connotations of it's their nutrients. It's essentially it's part of their
thrive,
for them to grow. It's a part of their diet. Yeah, I love that. Emer, what curiosity or conundrum do you want to conceptualize with Lego? And we said this could be a piece of research you're stuck on, or anything you think that would be interesting to see in 3D.
Okay, this was really helpful to me, and I must say thank you to this, because we have just been awarded a contract by the Department of Children Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. I have to say that really fast, because if I don't, I won't remember it. So sorry about that. It's my strategy for getting it right. So basically, we were involved a number of years ago in developing universal design guidelines for early learning and care settings. So now we've been awarded the contract to ensure that we develop these into 2 modules, so they're available free for everyone to see how again, going back to our commitment to the environment, that how the environment can be worked on in early learning and care settings to enable children to play, but while they're playing, to enable them to develop across all of those dimensions of development that we know children need to develop holistically. So here I have cognitive development. I'm just very interesting. Lisa had that upturned as a glass, and I have it as the brain, as your brain. So your cognitive development. This is an early learning and care setting. So this is cognitive development here. And here, standing up here, is imaginative development. And here you can see a little seat, and there's social development.
You lift it slightly. I just so want to see it up a little bit.
I'm afraid I'll knock down my ladder.
Here you go.
There's my social development there.
I love it. Yeah.
And here is my there's that tree is aesthetic development. And over here then we have spiritual development. It's a lovely red piece of transparent Lego. So that, as Lisa said earlier on, you know, we need spaces where children may not always want to be with other children, and just to reflect. And when I talk about spiritual, I'm not talking about anything to do with religion as such. What I'm talking about is that spiritual connection we all have as adults, and how we play with that spiritual connection, so that I suppose it's about our identity, really, so that we reach our own identity through that playfulness. Here we have the moral dilemmas that we all have every day, and conflict resolution, and understanding each other's position, and creating that respect, and creating that, really starting from a very young stage, that we all have views and we have to accommodate each other's views. And how do we do that? And here you can see this ladder, and this is about physical play, really. I think that's come across a lot in our conversation, the opportunities for children to physically play. And we know that not all children are going to be able to go up a ladder, but have we other ways of ensuring that all of our children get opportunities to engage in physical play, because we know that physical development is critical for all of us, and all wrapped around the edge of the early childhood setting. It could be an early childhood setting, it could be a post-primary room, it could be an organization, it could be a primary school, is the emotional development. And that every environment that we're in needs to be emotionally secure, and it needs to be a place where we can thrive. So how does play, what role has play got in that? So there we are, that's my build number 3.
That's
fantastic.
Wonderful. I
Thank
love
you.
hearing your interpretation of color. Like color has particular meanings to you. I do love to hear that in our workshops as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, mine looks very boring comparing to that, Emer.
We love boring. We love it.
Now we're talking about accommodating everything, so nothing's boring.
So again, I'm just going to repeat it just for our listeners. What curiosity or conundrum do you want to conceptualize with Lego?
Yeah, I couldn't think of anyone particular, but I'm thinking really all conundrums and problems in my life anyway seem to start the same. They're very big and chunky. So I suppose often at the first encounter, a problem does seem like this. It's just like a big block. And I can find it hard to see how am I going to deal with this, or how am I going to manage it. So as I said, I probably use drawing quite a bit, but after doing this, I could see how I could get into the habit of using Lego to do it. So I suppose I just kind of try to illustrate how maybe we might just try to break the problem down. And, you know, first of all, it might be, okay, there's 3 chunks to my problem. Then I might make 2 chunks into my problem. And then hopefully down here, I might have different little solutions to my problem. And I was also thinking that I would love to have lots of colored Post-its, and I could make little notes as well and stick them on my Lego board to help me solve my problem. So there's going to be a lot of Lego going on here.
I love that. Even just a way for you to conceptualize how you do problem solving. Like it's not a specific problem, it's the process. Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. That's all of our builds. I wish we gave you 5 builds. I've been really Was there anything like that became new to you, having just built out, having you kind of used this for the maybe first time? Anything that kind of became more visible or more apparent to you?
Yeah, I just think the potential. Sorry, Lisa. I just think the potential is huge. This is my first time using Lego in this way. I would be like Lisa. If there was a problem, I would do a lot of representation, and just like what's behind you on the board there, a lot of squiggling, a lot of maps. And last week, actually, we have this. All of our teacher education programs have been re-accredited by the Teaching Council, and as part of that, all students have this thing called Tashka, and basically Tashka is the Irish word for a treasure trove. And as part of that, we engage in conversations with the students. So last week I was engaging with 20 potential primary teachers, and I used a mapping exercise for them to enable them to represent what their experience has been to date. They were just first year students, and it was very powerful in terms of how the mapping enabled them to have a conversation. Without the mapping, you know, you don't have that kind of support, I suppose, really, in many ways. And again, it made it more exciting. But I could actually see how maybe the next iteration of this could be Lego, because Lisa and I worked together on the mapping in just to make it a little bit more exciting for the students. So that's what I see, that the potential of the Lego, perhaps in the next, when we meet them next, maybe something that we could do.
Fantastic.
Good to hear.
Yeah. You might even come in and do it with us. That might be nice.
It's a date. Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to.
Absolutely. You'd only love the opportunity.
Yeah, that might be what we might do with our next Tashka, Lisa. Both of us, if we put our both groups together and think about that. But anyway, that was just, look, that's just me on my blue sky thinking with no boundaries.
Anything for you, Lisa? I'm totally throwing a curveball with this question, but was there anything that became new?
No, I suppose I kind of use with my students a lot the play learning and narrative skills study that they undertook in the Pedal Research Centre in the University of Cambridge, and I suppose it was very much like using Lego to represent stories, to understand stories, and to create your own stories. And I suppose it's just that reminder again that you know, what's often good for children is good for us as well. So it was interesting. As I said, something you talk about a lot as being important for children, of having the experience to do it and realize, well, look, this could be really useful for me too.
And for us, like we would say, if you can write something down, you can build it with Lego.
Yeah.
Like, and we think that there's affordances, there's more creative capabilities in using a tactile object and sketching, not just sketching. It's just you know, like you said, Tashka, was that? No, what did I get?
Tashka, that's it.
Tashka, which was a treasure trove.
Treasure trove, yeah.
You're just trying to increase your tools, really, in the world, be you kid or adult as well. So certainly, I think partly the goal we had with wonderful guests like yourselves to actually build it out is just to show other people it can be done and it's not threatening. Sometimes when you hear anything as a framework or a method, you're kind of like, this adult identity thinks you need to be locked into getting it right. And there's a process and we need to get the process right. This kind of a little addendum, this little end to our podcast was always just to show people, just build.
And there's no right or wrong, and you're just assigning the meaning to the bricks, you know, so it's wonderful, and everyone's build is their own.
And again, the method, Lego Series Play method, is open source, and we're going to link that to the show notes. You should really just get hands-on, particularly if you think it can add value to help you make sense of the world a little bit more.
I think that is the end of our podcast.
Yeah.
And Emer and Lisa, you've been wonderful guests. I have learned so much. I have been soaking up all of the quotes and your knowledge, and you know, thank you so much for the wonderful work that you both do on a daily basis.
We need to give a shout out.
Yeah, I was just about to. Emer and Lisa are heavily involved with the play conference that will be taking place in Mary Immaculate in March in 2024. So if you would just maybe just like to share some details with our viewers just about the, you know, this wonderful conference that you are both involved in.
Yeah, so I'll start and I'm going to let Lisa finish. So basically it's the 3rd edition of our play conference, and it was a concept we had about revolutionising education through play. And we started way back, and then COVID stopped us. We had to pause a while for COVID. So we're back now on the 2nd of March on our 3rd edition of Revolutionising Education Through Play. And by education, we mean education right across the lives, because education never ends. So Lisa, maybe you can give some headlines from the, not headlights, headlines.
Well, look, we're hoping to be joined by Professor Paul Ramchandani, again from the Pedal Centre at the University of Cambridge, the first professor of play. So that's going to be very exciting to welcome Paul to Limerick. And we're also going to be joined by colleagues from the NCCA, the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, because there's so many positive things happening in that curriculum space at the moment in terms of embedding play across early years, primary and post-primary. I think it will be a real good opportunity for everyone to come together and discuss that progress. And we're going to have people from lots of different context from early years, primary, post-primary, and I know Jane and Ronan are going to be joining us as well. So we're looking forward to that. So we hope that there will be something for everyone, that it's not just about play in education, it's about play across homes, communities, healthcare settings, and again, not just for children either, for little people and big people.
Fantastic.
I attended in 2019, just before COVID struck. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I can't wait now to be a speaker at it. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Great.
It's been fantastic. Thank you so much, and we absolutely cheer you on in the work that you do. It's so needed in the world, in community, and it's been a pleasure for you taking time out. So thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much.
Our privilege. Thank you for the invitation and for all the lovely Lego that we were playing with earlier today.
Thank you so much. It's been
Take care.
hugely enjoyable for us as well. Thanks so much.